Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Our today's topic is features of Russian formalism. Before going through the features of Russian formalism, let's have an overview of formalism first. Formalism is a school of literary criticism that originated in Russia in the early 20th century. It originally focused on poetry, and the Russians who developed it are called formalists. Roman Jakobson and fellow formalists translated into English. The English began to take notice of their different approach to literature. The formalist perspective was assimilated and developed by the French before it made an impact on the English and American theories. Formalism suggests analysis of the text itself, and readers do not need detailed contextual knowledge beyond the text, and the meaning is inherently conveyed in the text's unique form or structure. What is examined in formalism? The form of the work as a whole, the form of each individual part of the text, the individual scenes and chapters, the settings, the tone, the point of view, the diction, and all other elements of the text which join to make it a single text. However, biographical information about the author, historical events outside of the story, or literary allusions, mythological patterns, or psychoanalytical traits of the characters are not considered in formalism. Alright, so now let's go through some of the popular definitions of formalism. Formalism may be defined as a critical approach in which the text under discussion is considered primarily as a structure of words. That is, the main focus is on the arrangements of language rather than on the implications of the words or on the biographical and historical relevance of the work in question. Formalism holds that true meaning can be determined only by analyzing the literary elements of the text and by understanding how these elements work together to form up a cohesive whole. Formalist critics examine a text regardless of its time period, regardless of its social, political, religious settings, and author's background. In literary theory, formalism refers to critical approaches that analyze, interpret, or evaluate the inherent features of a text. These features include not only grammar and syntax, but also literary devices like meter and tropes. A primary goal for formalist critics is to determine how such elements work together with the text's content to shape its effects on readers. According to formalism, the background of literature and other extra-literary phenomena do not belong to literary scholarship. The proper subject matter of the discipline is not even literature itself, but a phenomenon that Jakobson called literariness. So he declared, Jakobson, that it is literariness that makes a given work a literary work. In other words, literariness is a feature that distinguishes literature from other human creations and is made of certain artistic techniques or devices employed in the literary works. So these devices became the primary object of formalist analysis and as concrete structural components of the works of literature were essential in determining the status of literary study as a science. Alright, here we have a small list of literary devices. If you use these keywords, literary devices, you will find long lists of literary devices that are used in literary works. Right, here we see what is device and what is material. The notion of device was very seminal, very important, as it helped the formalists do away with the traditional division of literature into form and content. They claimed that form and content are inseparable and that they constitute one unity. In place of form and content, the formalists proposed to use the notions of device and material, respectively. Material stands for the raw and unorganized stuff of literature, not only themes, ideas, emotions, events, and the outside world, but also language is also considered as material. And device transforms material into an artistically shaped literary work of art. Defamiliarization. So one of the most important devices with which the formalists dealt was this device, defamiliarization. As described by Syuzhet, defamiliarization, a typical device of all literature and art, serves to present a familiar phenomenon in an uncommon fashion for the purpose of a renewed and prolonged aesthetic perception. So this kind of perception is an aim of art. So renewed and prolonged perception, to produce this type of perception, is an aim of art. Defamiliarization is the artistic technique of presenting the audience common things in an unfamiliar and strange way, so they could gain new perspectives and see the world differently. According to the Russian formalists who coined the term, it is the central concept of art and poetry. The term defamiliarization was first coined in 1917 by Russian formalist Viktor Syuzhet in his essay Art as Device. Syuzhet invented the term as a means to distinguish poetic from practical language on the basis of the former's perceptibility. Essentially, he states that poetic language is fundamentally different than the language that we use every day, because it is more difficult to understand, the poetic language. This difference is the key to the creation of art and the prevention of over-automatization, which causes an individual to function as though by formula. This distinction between artistic language and everyday language for Syuzhet applies to all artistic forms. The purpose of art is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived and not as they are known. The technique of art is to make objects unfamiliar, to make forms difficult, to increase the difficulty and length of perception, because the process of perception is an aesthetic end in itself and must be prolonged. So defamiliarization serves as a means to force individuals to recognize artistic language. In studying poetic speech in its phonetic and lexical structure, as well as in its characteristic distribution of words, and in the characteristic thought structures compounded from the words, we find everywhere the artistic trademark. What's the artistic trademark? That is, we find material obviously created to remove the automatism of perception. The author's purpose is to create the vision which results from that de-automatized perception. A work is created artistically so that its perception is impeded, is blocked, and the greatest possible effect is produced through the slowness of the perception. This technique is meant to be especially useful in distinguishing poetry from prose. For example, as Aristotle said, poetic language must appear strange and wonderful. As another writer, Anais Nin, discussed in her 1968 book, The Novel of the Future, it is the function of art to renew our perception, and what we are familiar with we cease to see, and the writer shakes up the familiar scene, and as if by magic we see a new meaning in it. According to literary theorist Yuri Margolin, defamiliarization of that which is or has become familiar or taken for granted, hence automatically perceived, is the basic function of all devices. And with defamiliarization come both the slowing down and the increased difficulty of the process of reading, and second, comprehending and awareness of the artistic procedures that are called devices which cause them. How can we distinguish between the language of fiction from ordinary language? So by a presentation of language. So in order to clarify this, the formalists introduced two concepts, Fabula and Syuzhet. Fabula means a straightforward account of something, tells what actually happens, like a short summary, and Syuzhet means the manipulation of Fabula creates Syuzhet, the story as it is actually told. So one Fabula can produce many Syuzhet, and the Syuzhet has the defamiliarizing effect. It actively interferes with the story's chronology. So we'll have some more details on Fabula and Syuzhet in coming slides. The Fabula and Syuzhet were first used in this sense by Vladimir Prop and Victor Chelwesky. The Fabula is the raw material of a story, and Syuzhet is the way a story is organized. Since Aristotle's Poetics, narrative plots are supposed to have a beginning, middle, and end, this beginning, middle, and end is often achieved in film and novels via flashbacks or flashwords. For example, a film starts with the death of the main character. So it starts with the death of the main character. So if the main character dies in the beginning, what happens then in the film? So, and then it tells his life through flashbacks. So then flashbacks are used. So in this context, the fabula of the film is the actual story of the main character's life, the way it happened in chronological order, like since from his childhood to his where he grew up, and got older and older, and then he died. And while the Syuzhet is the way the story is told throughout the movie, including flashbacks. Even though the formalists, both in their theory and practice, insisted on an autonomous and intrinsic approach to literature, over time they acknowledged the importance of studying literary history and literature's connections with other spheres and systems of life. In the case of Russian formalists, this change resulted from Stalinist pressures. So in later phase, formalism introduced the notions of literary evolution and renewal and the dynamism of literary forms. These notions stood for the formalist understanding of the history of literature. It was concerned with the literary change, modifications of the literary tradition, the laws of literary processes, and the development of art forms in relation to other aspects of culture. The connections of literature with other spheres and systems, like social conventions and other extra literary factors, were most directly addressed in the 1928 essay Problems of the Study of Literature and Language by Tynyanov and Jakobson. So this essay, however, was only a theoretical acknowledgement by the formalists of the links between literature and social forces. These links were also presented as autonomous and separate systems governed by their own laws. Such a presentation of the problem did not spare the formalists from the attacks by Russian Marxists who saw literature as an integral, not a separate part of social forces. So here is the review of formalism. So main elements of formalism. You can read them. The emphasis is on the form and structure, not on the content. The formalists viewed literature as a collection of devices interacting in the text, and they assumed literariness to be the product of employed devices. So the devices are employed and literariness is produced. Literariness is crafted by defamiliarizing devices. Estrangement of literary art can help to reach a better understanding of reality. And formalists looked into the ways in which the language of literature differs from ordinary language. Thank you very much. And